And let's call roll call.
Commissioner Alchek,
Present.
Commissioner Heckman,
Present.
Commissioner Lowing,
Present.
Commissioner Wicks,
Here.
Vice Chair Rupavar,
Present.
Commissioner Suma,
Present.
Chair Templeton.
Present.
Okay, we have a quorum. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much. Okay, now do we have anyone who wishes to speak on items not on the agenda? If so, please raise your hand.
Okay, we do have one raised hand, so let's get the speaker timer up. Okay, our speaker will be Rebecca Eisenberg. If you can please unmute yourself and you may speak.
Hi, thank you so much, Planning Commission, for allowing me to address you today. I know you have a tenant study session later, but this is a specific item that I did not see on tonight's agenda. And that is two issues that came up before the City Council last week that I'm hoping that you all can consider taking a closer look at. One involves height limits for residential developments. The City Council outsourced to a consultant as research regarding how to achieve more affordable housing. And that consultant came back with a number of recommendations, one which included the fact that lifting the height limits would actually make it easier for the city to build more affordable housing under current strategies. But City Council didn't even consider, as far as I could tell, lifting those height limits. So I guess I want to say, since you're the advisory group on these issues, if you could consider maybe issuing an opinion about these height limits. And I want to speak for the fact that I am a resident. I live in Old Palo Alto in an RH1 neighborhood, and I strongly support the lifting of these height limits. In part, I dislike height limits because, for many reasons. One is which is that it harms the environment to have to build out rather than build up. And another in that, and this is the second point I want to make, is that I believe that multifamily developments actually help improve a neighborhood. I grew up in a community where every household was filled with either grandparents or a family with kids. And I remember Palo Alto being that way when I lived here in the 1980s. But right now, at least for my kids here in Old Palo Alto, there aren't any kids there anywhere near their age nearby at all. We strongly believe, at least in this family, that having multifamily developments in our neighborhood would be very helpful to our quality of life, because the one thing we're really lacking is kids. So those are the two things I wanted to say. One is that I hope you'll maybe rethink whether advice about height limits, and second, maybe consider that there are many of us residents who actually want multifamily developments within our RH1 neighborhoods. Thank you for considering.
Thank you, Rebecca, for your comments. Chair Templeton, that concludes oral communications.
You're muted.
Thank you. Any agenda changes or additions or deletions?
None.
Okay, great. So let's move to agenda item number 1, which is the city official reports.
Oh, yeah. Hi, I'll take this. Amy French, Chief Planning Official. Rachel is out of the meeting tonight, but I'll just give a quick update on COVID related, and that is that the city and county continue to respond to COVID-19. As of now, we remain in the red tier. Yesterday was a chance to move up. However, our numbers did not support this move. So next Tuesday, we may be able to advance again. There is COVID testing available coming up October 9th from 9:30 a.m. till 4:30 p.m. at the Palo Alto Arts Center. Another item that is a thanks to the Planning and Transportation Commissioners who responded. We will be having a Planning and Transportation Commission meeting on November 18th. That will be a special meeting and the only meeting in November of this year. Another exciting moment is for us is that we have made an offer to a senior housing planner that has actually accepted the offer. So we're very excited. So we're going to get through the background check and paperwork. We'll go ahead and announce who that person is, and we're expecting them to begin in early November. We're just very excited about that. And that concludes the brief report.
Excellent. Well, that is good news. All right. Next up is the study session to review the pending Planning and Housing 2020 legislation.
I'd like to introduce Claire Campbell, who will say some words about herself. She's here tonight to present this first item. Welcome back to planning, Claire.
Yeah, thank you so much. So my name is Claire Campbell, and I am now the Long Range Planning Manager, and I've been in this role for about 8 weeks since the beginning of August. I was previously working in the Development Center as the Permit Manager for the past year. And then prior to that, I've had many years of time in long range planning and in current planning. And I've basically had my fingers in all of the areas of the department. So I've got a great range of experience with our department here in Palo Alto. And I bring all of that to this position here that I'm in today. So I'm looking forward to for this role and working with you all closely in the future. Thank you. So should we get started with my item? Okay, great. All right, let me share my screen. And share. All right, so everyone's seeing the PowerPoint? Great. All right, so so tonight we're here sorry. So the purpose of our meeting this evening is a study session to review with you the update of key 2020 legislation for housing and planning related items. And these are ones that are just most current and relevant to our current operations. So although staff hasn't yet fully analyzed all of the details of these new laws, we have provided some preliminary feedback as to what the implications may be for additional tasks for our long-range planning work program. So tonight I'm going to be reviewing 5 of these bills with you. So here for the 2020 legislative session, there were many bills that were introduced, and this is a really fun graphic that I have here in the PowerPoint to share with you, but it just shows the range and the volume of bills that came forward. And but with the onset of COVID-19 and our shelter-in-place conditions, the legislature had to really pare down what they would focus on for this year, for this session. So many bills did not move forward just because of the timing and they ran out of time for the review. And it's not because there was a lack of interest. So we can definitely expect to see many of these return next year for the next session. So this past Monday, September 28th, the governor signed into law the bills that we will be reviewing this evening. And this is the list of the ones that we're going to be looking at tonight. And just to note that there were other housing related bills, probably maybe 10 or 12 other ones, maybe 10-ish, that I haven't focused on in our presentation this evening because these are ones that I think aren't as relevant to our day-to-day activities and operations. So I really have focused on ones that I think will have a direct impact to the work that we do currently. So all but one of these will be effective come January 1, 2021, and AB 831, which is focused on SB 35, that was an urgency ordinance. So that one actually became effective on Monday when it was signed. So the first one here is AB 2345. So this one modifies the existing state density bonus regulations. The key changes from this bill are that it increases the maximum density bonus for housing projects from 35% to 50%. It makes it easier for a project to qualify for 2 and 3 development concessions by reducing the required percentage of lower income level housing units. So in order to get 2 concessions for your project, 17% of those units must be at the lower income level range. And that is a reduction from 20%, which is what it currently is today. And for 3 concessions, the project would need to have 24% of the units at a lower income level, which is a reduction from 30%. So the bill also reduces parking spaces for 2 and 3 bedroom units from 2 spaces to 1.5 spaces. And it also requires that the state mandated annual progress report include density bonus applications that we've received and approved for the year. So as a result of these new regulations, staff will have to update section 1815. It's our current density bonus section of Title 18 to reflect these new standards. So that's something that we will be working on and we will bring forward when we have a draft ordinance. Okay, so the next one is AB 725, and this is related to the housing element and RHNA. It is focused on the missing middle housing, and it requires zoning for moderate density housing, such as duplexes or fourplexes or townhomes, through the housing element update process. So this bill requires that 25%, at least 25%, of the city's RHNA allocations must be for moderate and above moderate units and located on sites zoned for at least 4 units. So I'm just going to give you a quick example of what that means. So if our RHNA allocation for moderate and above moderate income levels totaled 800 units, 25% of those, so 200 units, would need to be on sites zoned to allow 4 or more units. So that's what that means. So the bill also requires that these sites be identified in our housing opportunity sites in our housing element. And it also specifically points out that accessory dwelling units and JADUs, junior accessory dwelling units, do not count in this 25% requirement. So right now, staff is in the early stages of preparing for the next housing element update. So definitely when we go through the process of analyzing and preparing that work effort, we will be incorporating the requirements of AB 725 as we go along that. All right, so the next one is AB 831, and this one is the cleanup bill for SB 35. And again, this is the one that became effective on Monday when it was signed. So SB 35 established back in 2017 a ministerial approval process for qualifying housing projects in jurisdictions that do not meet their state mandated goals for housing production. So for Palo Alto specifically, a project must have at least 50% or more affordable housing units in order to take advantage of this streamlining process. So I don't think to date we've actually had any projects that we've been able to process through SB 35. So the 2 key things that were changed or amended for this is that the bill includes limits on the city's discretion regarding review and approval of public improvements. So often we'll see projects that come through that have to do something maybe in the public right of way. So utilities, ped and bike path connections, or landscaping improvements. So we do have specifically limited discretion on how we review those components. And the bill also provides it also allows SB 35 projects to make modifications following an SB 35 approval. So before they obtain their building permit, they're allowed to go through a process to make some changes to their project. And we have to apply the very limited or narrow review process to that project if they request it. So for this bill, staff will need to evaluate further what procedural or code changes will be needed as a result of this bill. I know currently we're in the process of working on our objective standards relating to SB 35 implementation, but we may need to incorporate additional items because of this bill. So we'll be working on that. All right, so the next bill is AB 1851, and this bill supports the development of affordable housing on religious use sites. So this bill prohibits requiring the replacement of religious use parking spaces that are removed to allow development of an associated housing project. And with that, the city cannot require a correction to any existing non-compliant parking standards, and they are allowed a maximum of up to 50% reduction in their existing parking to accommodate this housing development. And lastly, with this bill, the new units would only be required to have one parking space per unit. So for this one, for sure, we will be working on some updates with Title 18 for consistency with the state law. And when we have that draft ordinance ready, we'll be bringing that forward to the commission to review. And the last one I'm going to do a summary of is SB 288. So this one creates new statutory CEQA exemptions for various transit projects. And it also extends some existing transit related exemptions to expire in 2030. So the intent of this bill is generally to help streamline infrastructure improvements, and the exemptions are for specific transit related projects listed here. I think we've got some on the slide. So for the creation of new bus rapid transit, bus or light rail services, transit prioritization projects, projects that improve customer information and wayfinding for transit riders, bicyclists, and pedestrians, projects carried out by a city or county to reduce minimum parking requirements, and projects for pedestrian and bike facilities. So the creation of these new CEQA exemptions and the extension of these existing ones is just going to help facilitate the implementation of new transit related projects. And we don't anticipate any additional workload related to this particular bill. So again, the purpose of tonight's update is to make the commission aware of the relevant new planning related legislation and to indicate how those bills affect our long range planning work program. Staff's next steps are to review the adopted legislation and determine the appropriate follow-up staff actions, which will include updating Title 18 to bring applicable code sections into compliance with the state law. So this concludes staff's presentation, and I'm happy to answer any questions you have. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do we have any questions before we go to public comment? All right, seeing none.
I actually, sorry, I need to raise my hand. Sorry.
No, go for it.
I think it's just a clarifying question for AB 725.
Okay.
I just think I'm not grasping it. So 25% of our RHNA allocation for moderate and above moderate units has to be allocated to sites with at least 4 units. What if we don't have enough sites? Like, does that mean we need to like take sites that are allocated for 1 unit and upzone it to 4? Or how does that, I'm just not grasping it. Can you just clarify that for me?
So what it means, and I'm sorry, did I have like everyone's pictures on this and the whole time? Sorry. Anyway, what it means is that, so I was trying to kind of give an example to hopefully explain it. So basically the city has a RHNA allocation for moderate and above moderate units.
Right.
So my example was having 800 units. So if we have 800 units in that income level, we need to have 25% of that number, so 200 units in this example, that would need to be on sites that are zoned to allow for 4 or more units. So currently the zoning that we have in place that allows for 4 or more units would be most of our RM. So if any RM like RM 15, 30, or sorry, not 15, 20, 15 and 40, and our mixed use developments, typically all of those will allow for 4 or more units to be developed on those sites. So what will happen is when we go through our housing element process of identifying housing opportunity sites, this is part of that process. We're going to look at all of these sites. And when we find those sites, we'd have to make sure at least we're taking care of this requirement for this bill. Did that help a little bit?
Yeah, I got it. And then we have enough sites where we can do this. We have enough RM sites, whatever, where we would be able to comply with this requirement.
Yes.
Cool. Okay, that makes sense.
All right, anyone else? All right, if you're a member of the public and would like to comment on this agenda item, please raise your hand. All right, giving you one more moment to raise your hands if you'd like to speak on this agenda item. Okay, so let's go back to the commissioners. Commissioner Heckman.
Thank you, Chair Templeton, and thank you for the report, Ms. Campbell. I did have a question on the Wicks bill, AB 1851. I was wondering if in your review of that legislation, you got some clarity on what they mean by affiliated affordable housing project. Is that clergy housing or something else?
Well, all I understand, it has to be associated with their operations. And I haven't dived into it deeply yet, but my general understanding, it has to be associated with their operations. But I can definitely find out more and we can bring that back to you.
Yeah, I would actually appreciate that in some future report from the assistant director, maybe, to just
Yeah,
bring
I'll
that
just add
back.
too. I assumed it was student housing as well. I mean, because I'd heard some chatter about how this was allowing us to include student housing formats in RHNA allocation. So some clarification on that would be also helpful. Sorry to take over your question, Bart, but it's very aligned with what you just suggested.
Okay. That was my only question. I'll look forward to getting more information. Thank you.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. And next is Commissioner Lowing.
Yeah, I'll first pile in on that one there on Wicks. If it's part of operations, the question is it for money making for that operations of that religious organization, or is it for social work? So in general, three of us want some clarification there.
Got it.
Yep. Okay. Overall, I didn't hear you say if all of these applied equally to rental units and units for sale.
So maybe it depends on which one we're looking at.
Okay.
So I don't know if you want me to kind of go through it, but the density bonus applies to both rental and for sale units. This one, so for the RHNA and housing element, that would be for whether it's for sale or rental as well.
Okay.
And SB 35 applies to all housing projects, whether it's rental or for sale. And then this one, I'm not too sure. I would assume it's part of the church or whichever organization would be owning that. So I don't think it's either one. It's ownership, I guess. The church would own it for that institution.
Good. You answered most of that question, that it's applicable regardless of rental or purchase, and I think that's a important consideration for us to know. Under Gonzalez 2345, I understand the reduction in affordable. Does that mean that all of the rest of the units could be at full market rate? There's no more tiering of affordable leveling?
Oh, there are tiers. So that doesn't change, but it's just for the one level. So that hasn't changed. There's just a specific change to a certain level.
Okay.
There's only,
Good.
it's a very specific change.
Good. I'm glad I asked that question. And then on Wicks, could you remind us what the current missing middle AMI definition is?
You know, honestly, I feel like that's been a little bit of a mystery to kind of nail down 100%. I think it is between, I can't tell you for sure, but I think it's between 120 to 80. But let me look that up and I can confirm for you.
Okay.
I know there's been some back and forth about what that specific range is supposed to be.
Okay, and there was a phrase relative to Wicks in the second paragraph that this requires applicable jurisdictions. Does that just mean where there is affordable housing allocation?
So we're talking about the one on the screen?
I'm talking about the second paragraph under Wicks, yeah.
Okay,
I believe the commissioner is referring to 725.
thank you.
Correct.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, okay. So for this particular requirement or for this bill, it definitely affects just the housing opportunity sites that are identified through our housing element update process.
Okay. Very good. And that's it for me. Thanks.
Thank you.
All right. Would any other commissioners like to speak to this item? Vice Chair Rupivar.
Just a question. I don't know if you know the answer to this. I was looking at your map of housing legislation highlights. I know some of those were passed and some of them weren't, like AB 69, I think was passed very recently, like a week or two ago. Do you have any sense of which of these are going to come back for the new legislative year? Or like, what are the hot button ones? Just so we can like think ahead.
I don't know which ones those would be. I think there were so many that were shelved just because of everything that was going on. So I wouldn't be able to speak to that. You know, maybe we'd have to do a little bit more research to see what was sort of the hot issue of the, but I don't know off the top of my head what that would be.
Okay, that's okay.
Guessing, right? Because I wouldn't
Yeah,
know.
yeah. I didn't know. I thought maybe you knew and I'd be curious, but that's cool. That's fine. Thank you.
Okay, Commissioner Suma.
Thank you. Some of my questions have been asked. I was also curious about the legal definition of missing middle. It seems to be a kind of loosey-goosey thing, and I don't understand how we apply law and zoning regulations to somebody's idea of what missing middle means. So that's kind of curious to me. And then I also did want to observe that in the background on packet page 8 of our staff report, that you refer to a lot of these bills didn't move forward because of time ran out and not because there was a lack of interest. I watched this the state legislature pretty carefully for a lay person this year, and I would say that my observation was that a lot of these development bills didn't pass because lack of interest on the part of our state legislatures in advancing them due to what they felt was their merit. So I just wanted to put that out there. I don't know, you know, there's not a lot we can say about this. If something is enacted into law, of course we have to comply with it. But I find it dismaying that some of these bills are reducing affordable housing requirements and mixing up people at affordable levels with those in great need of affordable housing, and the mystery of what missing middle means legally and how we're addressing that. So I don't have any other specific questions. Those are just my observations in general.
Great, thank you. Anyone else or anyone want a second pass?
So I can address this issue of you know, the concept of the missing middle and how it's defined.
Thank you, Mr. Yang.
Yeah, sorry I wasn't able to join earlier. So the bill itself doesn't use the phrase missing middle. I think that's just something that's popped up to describe, you know, in colloquial terms, its purpose. But the bill deals with moderate income housing and above moderate income housing. And that's defined to, moderate income housing is defined to mean households at 80 to 120% of AMI. And then above moderate income housing is above 120% AMI. So that's what that means.
Great, thank you. Commissioner Suma, do you have any more questions?
No, if I might make a broad observation, that I think a lot of these bills were driven by, not by HCDs, the State Department of Housing and Community Development numbers of housing deficits we may be experiencing, or I was reading Freddie Mac's evaluation of state by state and countrywide housing deficits, and they were instead based on this 3.5 million. And I think it's kind of unfortunate that we haven't been able to establish a reliable basis of missing housing units, and that there's so many different numbers out there. But HCD and Freddie Mac sort of agree that it's closer to 1 million, and Freddie Mac is even lower in the 800,000. Freddie Mac will, and I can send you these studies if you haven't had a chance to look them up on your own, but Freddie Mac thinks 3 million is a countrywide deficit of housing. So I just wanted to put it on the record that I think it's unfortunate that we're not doing the things I think are important in housing, which is addressing the affordability issue that so many have that would like to live or stay in our community. And instead, we're addressing it from the development side, increasing the benefits and for developers. So I just wanted to get that on the record before we leave this conversation, understanding full well we have to comply, of course, with any state laws.
Thank you, Commissioner Suma. Commissioner Riggs, followed by Vice Chair Rupavar.
Well, I'll put on the record that to address affordable housing, you have to do three things. You have to produce, you have to protect, as well as you have to figure out how to address some of the I mean, all those three of those things are connected to affordable housing. So you can't address affordable housing without producing the units. It's got to be a part of a comprehensive strategy. So, and that's across the income spectrum. So, I have some specific questions. Sorry, and I was going to say produce, promote, and protect, but promote being, but that's just a sing-songy way of getting it like three verticals. I was curious, I just want to clarify on SB religious housing bill, and I apologize, I still don't have the nomenclature down. Is it 1851? And so I just wanted to clarify my comment based on what Commissioner Heckman asked, is that my understanding of that bill is doesn't have to be connected to a religious, a parochial use of the housing produced on the site. But I think I need a little clarification, because I mean, I'll just hypothetically, I'll just say like, one of the ways I envision this is just like, okay, I am at a parochial campus. My campus could say we want to produce housing for students or faculty, and necessarily would they have to be connected with the campus? My understanding is they would not have to be. They could be, but I think we would need some clarification. I mean, if we looked at this in the Palo Alto context, it could a religious institutional site or a religious institution, for example, partner with Stanford. And I think that it's an interesting idea. It's a provocative idea. And I think it really hits a segment that's underproduced in the housing market in terms of unit type. And we had John Dostovsky here from Star City last year, who was talking about these certain types of units, these co-living units that we're not particularly producing for. And I think if I'm quoting you right, Commissioner Lowering, you were like, when can you do your development here in Palo Alto? But the point here is that maybe this is one of the opportunities we could look at, but I think we need some clarification. I need some better understanding of the policy. The other thing I just want to highlight, and what to a certain degree concerns me about the Grayson bill, the 831, is we have this tension between sustainable mobility and the provisions the impact fees and the provisions the city needs to put on projects from a supporting sustainable mobility standpoint. When we take away the requirement for parking, but we don't provide the mechanism to enforce or finance bike ped facilities and we put all the burden on the general fund or on tax increment, some type of special use tax, my worry is those bike ped multimodal transportation facilities aren't going to be produced. And because we don't set our own agenda, they're never going to come to Planning Commission for us to talk about. And the good example here is, I'll just cite it because we talked about this about 2 months ago with the San Antonio project that Ted O'Hanlon brought us. And we talked about, we're going to do this awesome, sustainable, sustainably oriented multifamily building down on San Antonio, but it is a precursor. And now potentially we can't enforce a change in the mobility environment around it without doing a specific plan that could, that predates any type of investment in sustainable mobility on the Santa boys, please. Hey guys, sorry, it's COVID. I've got little boys. So anyway, I just want to highlight that because I think that is an unresolved tension, and I don't know that I think we need an cities need an institutional mechanism to talk about that. And I don't know how it happens with council, with a commission that can't bring stuff to itself, and council that may or may not highlight these things when they approve a project. So I'll leave it at that.
All right, thank you so much, Commissioner Riggs. Vice Chair Rupavar, followed by Commissioner Alchek.
Yeah, I just wanted to, just going back to the legislation, I think we are clearly, like, across the Bay Area, across California, across the United States, we are clearly facing a very significant housing crisis. If you even look at the RHNA numbers this cycle, the state has come out and doubled the Bay Area's RHNA allocation numbers and tripled the Los Angeles area's RHNA allocation numbers. So I think the message the state is trying to send to all cities is, you need to step up housing or we are going to come in over the top and start legislating. And I think we're seeing that happen. And a lot of local jurisdictions losing, control in areas that they previously had jurisdiction to legislate in. So that is my reading of the tea leaves when I look at what is going on a macro level from a state level with housing. So I think we're going to continue seeing these types of bills until cities are ready to step up and do their job and start creating housing. And I do agree with Commissioner Riggs. We just need to create more housing. Like, I think if we only focus on, I do agree affordable housing is extremely important, but when you have more housing generally, that helps to kind of like regulate prices and rents more, because the issue is if you only focus on affordable housing, and we've said this tons of times before, and you start putting in all these restrictions where it's not going to pencil for the people that we need to construct that affordable housing for us, we're going to end up with no housing and, continuing like legislation over the top from the state. So that's my kind of read of what's going on, in my opinion.
Thank you very much, Vice Chair Rupavar. Commissioner Alchek.
Hi, good evening. I think I'll just say, look, we're at Planning Commission having a study session on new laws passed. I'm not sure that there's like commission benefit to sort of sharing political perspectives on these laws. I understand why people are taking positions them right now, because we're in the middle of an election campaign locally, and residents want to understand how potential officials feel about certain laws. But I think at a commission level, I'm not sure we should spend too much time on those sort of perspectives. Since it was brought up, I always suggest that I've always encouraged the idea of commissioners that come across information that they think is relevant or interesting, sharing that. That we haven't really had a normal year. So, just because we haven't had a lot of that this year, I don't think is sort of relevant. But in years past, that's not uncommon. Commissioners read an interesting article in the New York Times or in the San Francisco Chronicle about housing related issues. They can share it, and it helps our dialogue. So I would welcome the sharing of the reports that Commissioner Suma referred to. But since it was brought up, I will suggest, I would like to just acknowledge that I have read and studied reports that Governor Newsom has referred to when he's talked about the 3 million unit deficit, the 2 to 3 million unit deficit that he believes is in the state of California. And I've also read the reports that he's referred to when he refers to the deficit in the United States of America, to which he has mentioned in the past, California having 50% of that deficit. But I do think that I think one of the things that I really would love to spend time on is understanding how, for example, we would experience one of these, laws, how an applicant would utilize one of them. And so I don't know, it sounds like there's some report, two commissioners referred to a report or some further time spent on this. And I do think that it would be interesting to have staff do an exercise on a lot. What would an SB 35 application look like on a given lot? And I think that is worth the time, because it helps people understand how the application would have been under our current zoning and how it would, in essence, benefit from SB 35. And so I think I've said this before. I really think those sorts of illustrations, if you will, do a lot more than simply descriptions of or written interpretations of the law changes. The sort of I'm not suggesting a 3D model, but a more illustrative description of what a project would look like on such and such parcel, I think would really help members of the public and frankly the commission and the city council probably wrap their heads around some of these issues. And I also think actually, and I don't know if anybody here has done it, the last time we did it, I think the city of Palo Alto sponsored participation. I remember Councilman Member Niss was there, and former Commissioner, oh my gosh, I can't believe I'm forgetting her name. A former commissioner was there, and we did this event where we participated in sort of a city process with other city officials locally in working through an application. I think it was sponsored by the Urban Land Institute. I can't remember what that event was, but I think it would be really interesting if we in-housed something like that and went through the process of what exactly, how state density bonus laws work. What does an applicant experience from their side of the table when they approach a project, and how do the menus work? What effort do they have to make to qualify for this in theory and that, and have that sort of, imagine what, those charts where it's like yes, no, and then the arrow goes here and here, and then that question is yes, no. Like imagine there was a chart that sort of showed the path to various finish lines depending on the decisions you made. I think that would also be illuminating, and I'm sure that's busy work, and somebody that's talented with probably PowerPoint or something could create it. But I really think those illustrations would help. And so if there is an effort to follow up and there's some material produced, I would encourage staff to consider those two ideas. Number one, some exercise that demonstrated how a SB 35 project or like would be, would would be different from a project on that same parcel. And then the other one that really went through the exercise of just what does it mean when somebody benefits from bonuses as they go through our development process, and how do they qualify for them and what the trade-offs are. And even it would be interesting also to have some analysis of, these are all the options that an applicant could choose from, but here are the ones that they choose from every time. You know, is there among the sets of options that someone can choose from, what are the ones that really they're choosing almost every time? And so we become familiar with that process and understand it from sort of a historical perspective. I think that would help too.
Thank you, Commissioner Alchek. Vice Chair Rupavar, your hand is still up. Did you want to go again?
No, sorry.
No problem. All right. Any others? Okay. Thank you very much, Ms. Campbell, for this presentation. It's very helpful to see what's on the horizon and to understand what may be affecting building in Palo Alto. So we appreciate your efforts and welcome to the team, I guess is appropriate to say. Or is it welcome back? I'm not exactly sure which is the right one, but we're glad you're here and appreciate you taking the time to put this together for us. Okay, so let's move on to agenda item number 2, Ms. French.
Yes, today we have our fellow, Lauren Bigelow, who is here to join us and present her PowerPoint. I think I see, oh, there she is. Hello, Lauren. Lauren has come to us through this fellow opportunity for 2 years, and she will describe what she's up to and the path she is taking here. Thank you, Lauren.
My pleasure. And I will just share my screen here. Come on, guy. It all works out in the end, right?
Absolutely.
Okay.
There you go.
All right. Good evening, Chair Templeton and PTC commissioners. Thank you so much for the opportunity to present this evening. My name is Lauren Bigelow, and I am the Partnership for the Bay's Future Fellow placed with the City of Palo Alto. You may wonder why I'm here tonight, so I'll talk some about the Challenge Grant. And I will also be talking about Palo Alto's rental housing inventory and the profile that we've created of Palo Alto renters. And we will also talk a little about renter protection policies as they apply to the city of Palo Alto. Okay, so to give you a little bit of context about the Challenge Grant and the council's focus on renter protections. On September 10th, 2018, council members Koo and Du Bois introduced a colleague's memo regarding the need to review Palo Alto's existing protections and what neighboring jurisdictions were doing to protect their renters. In August of 2019, city staff submitted an application to Partnership for the Bay's Future, which I'll occasionally refer to as PBF or the Partnership. Their thought process was that the Planning and Development Department had been operating with some staff vacancies and lacked the policy expertise to make much headway on renter protections. The Challenge Grant's programmatic design was such that while participating jurisdictions did not get extra funds, they were loaned a mid-career fellow for 2 years to advance tenant protection policy. In Palo Alto's case, this was the answer to how renter protections could be thoughtfully addressed. On February 4th, 2020, the city of Palo Alto was notified that it had successfully competed for the Challenge Grant and would therefore be awarded a fellow for 2 years. And on March 16th, 3 hours before the governor announced shelter in place, I showed up to work for my first day. So a little bit about the Partnership for the Bay's Future It was established in early 2019 and is really focused on building an inclusive, vibrant, and livable Bay Area. They are taking a multi-pronged approach because the partnership really believes that the housing crisis is a big problem that is decades in the making. So there will be no one silver bullet that'll take care of everything. There's a regional push to recognize the 3 Ps, which are better understood as production, preservation, and protection of affordable housing as the approach to take. So while the fellowship itself assists jurisdictions in the creation of policy, another arm of PBF works on the development and production of affordable housing. There's also an emphasis on the notion that no one city should shoulder the burden of the housing crisis alone. We're all in this together, and this should be addressed as a regional issue. Because of this, the 7 fellows involved in the challenge grant communicate constantly about what they're working on and what best practices they're seeing. The fellowship is being managed by PolicyLink, which is a racial equity think tank based out of Oakland that was started over 20 years ago by Angela Glover Blackwell. Blackwell is fought for inclusion and the protection of the most vulnerable, which is the kind of ethos that the fellows bring to their work with the jurisdiction. We really believe in bringing that racial equity lens to policy creation. There are also several large philanthropic organizations like the San Francisco Foundation, the Chan Zuckerberg Initiative, the Ford Foundation, and Silicon Valley Community Foundation that help push some of the work forward. Recognizable names like Facebook, Genentech, and Kaiser Permanente are also involved. There are currently approximately $500 million that have been fundraised for this initiative specifically. Okay, so now we get to the fun part. The profile of Palo Alto's rental units and who Palo Alto renters are. So according to the American Community Survey, or ACS data, there are 26,212 occupied household units in Palo Alto. Of those, 11,764 units are rental units and 14,448 are owner-occupied housing units. This means that a whopping 45% of the housing stock is occupied by renters in Palo Alto. ACS data also states that the average number of residents per residential unit is approximately 2.55. So based on that number, we can estimate that there are about 29,998 renters and approximately 36,842 owners in Palo Alto. Big numbers, I know. And another interesting little tidbit is that we need to understand renters in Palo Alto. We must first understand that which is rented and is being rented by Palo Altans. And so there are 11,764 rental units in the city of Palo Alto. As you can see here, more than a quarter of the renters in Palo Alto are renting single family homes. And a lot of people believe that this is somewhat unusual for communities, but that is not the case according to data. It also makes renters a little bit more difficult to engage with because if a renter is in a single family home, it's less easy to identify them than those that are in apartment complexes. About 10% of the population rents duplexes, triplexes, and fourplexes, small and medium-sized apartment complexes between 5 to 49 units. make up a quarter of the local rental housing stock, and 22% of the rental units are located at apartment complexes of 50 units or more. One interesting fact is that there are 1,696 affordable rental units that are part of Palo Alto's rental stock. So approximately 14% of the rental housing stock is affordable. Affordable housing rental units serve households from between 30% of area median income to 50% of area median income. And inclusionary zoning units, more commonly referred to as BMR units, serve between households making between 50 to 80% of area median income traditionally. The AMI for a household of 4 in Santa Clara County is, as you see the red number up at top, $141,600 for the entire household. A household of 4 making 50% of the area median income will make $78,950 and will be part of that very low income category. If you reference the staff report, you'll see that 39% of households in Palo Alto are making more than $150,000 a year, while 27% are making less than $50,000 a year. And that is important because HUD, the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, has said that anyone spending more than 30% of their income is cost burdened. So what we really care about is how many Palo Altans are spending more than 30% of their income on housing costs. And
I'm sorry to interrupt. Can you go back to the last slide real quick?
Of course.
The number, when you say 27% of, are you referring to households or individuals?
I'm referring to rental households.
Households making less than $50,000 represent 27% of Palo Altans?
Correct. There's more than a quarter of Palo Alton households that are renting that are making less than $50,000 a year.
And do you have, can you extrapolate that to the number of, you had was it 2.25 members, average members per household?
Sure. So 27 times 2.55, right? No, we're saying, oh gosh.
27% of rental households, which is the 11,000 number.
Right. So give me 1 second to break out my calculator here. So 11,764 times 0.27 equals 3,176.
So we have roughly 3,000 individuals that are living below the poverty line.
Those are households.
Well, and these are units. So that means
okay, so
households equal units.
There's 3,100 households, which you would multiply by the 2.55 number to get the average members.
To get 8,100
individuals roughly living below poverty line.
That is based on the ACS data that we've looked at. Those are the numbers that we're thinking. Yes.
3 year, 5 year, or 1 year?
5.
5 year. Okay.
Commissioners, would it be all right if
I'm sorry. I just
held
didn't
those
want to,
questions until after the presentation? It's a little distracting. Thank you.
I'm sorry about that. Sorry.
That's all right.
I get it. It's exciting stuff, but I'll keep on keeping on. Okay, so lots of information to get through about Palo Alto renters. The big deal is, well, it's all big deals, but essentially 37% of the population is on average spending more than a third of their income on housing costs, which would refer to, HUD would refer to as being cost burdened. However, if you examine the table here, for folks that are making, for households that are making more than $75,000 a year, only 17% of those households are cost burdened. If your household is making less than $75,000 a year, between 70 to 90% of those households are cost burdened. Okay. All right, so let's talk about renter protection policies. Palo Alto has several renter protection policies, and some have been in place for decades. For example, the Palo Alto Mediation Program has been active since the 70s. And one-year leases and tenant relocation assistance also apply to some units. There are several different levels of eviction moratoriums that currently apply during the pandemic. They are temporary and expiring at varying degrees. So I wanted to talk a little bit about those because there are renter protections built in there as well. So beginning with our eviction moratorium, which is tied to the local state of emergency and will expire when City Council votes to no longer extend the state of emergency, that's applicable to renters. Then on top of that, you have Santa Clara County's eviction moratorium, which applies to all of the cities in Santa Clara County, as well as the unincorporated areas. That eviction moratorium is tied to the state of emergency, and local experts believe that because the governor signed AB 3088 on August 31st, he most likely will not be extending the state of emergency, because the CDC was also concerned about how people being evicted would impact the spread of COVID-19. They issued a national eviction moratorium, which is good through the end of the year. Okay, so on January 1st, 1482 becomes, it comes into play on January 1st of this year. It was actually signed in 2019 and is known as the Tenant Protection Act of 2019. It has several common rental protection laws folded into it so that there are anti-rent gouging and just cause protections that cover the entire state. So for example, with the anti-rent gouging, rent increases are capped at 5% plus the rate of inflation, or they are a maximum of 10% increases annually. There's also the just cause eviction framework that is built in. And with just cause evictions, they're broken up into two. So they're split into at fault and no fault cases. And with at fault eviction cases, the causes are based on the actions of the renter that fall within the permissible scope of under the law, and would be something like non-payment of rent or breaking a lease. No fault eviction causes are when the eviction is not based on the actions of the renter, but rather due to the owner's actions. And that would be something like an owner intending to occupy or substantially remodel a unit. The thing to note here with these statewide renter protection policies is that the state doesn't supply funds for implementation. And so local municipalities are responsible for designing implementation that best suits their economy. Community, both. So where do we go from here? My plan and the rest of the team is to continue analyzing renter protection policies, continue reaching out to the renter community so that we have a greater understanding of a greater understanding of the needs of Palo Alto renters, and then to come back to you and to council with proposed renter protection policies and analysis. Because as has been mentioned many times tonight, I am here for 2 years, so I'm not going away anytime soon. So I would really love to hear what surprised you about what you heard tonight, and what you'd be interested in hearing more about, and what your ideas were regarding renter outreach. And that's me and Claire. Thank you so much, guys.
Excellent. Thank you for your presentation, Ms. Bigelow. All right, before we go to comments from the public, please, commenters from the public, please raise your hand and get ready. Do any commissioners have questions before we go to the public comments? Vice Chair Rupavar.
Always with the questions. So, I know. AB 1482, I just want to clarify, that exempts single family residential townhomes, condos, right?
Oh, goodness.
I think so.
Okay.
And then my next question is, do you have data as to how much of our rental stock is in single family residential housing, condo and townhomes? Because I would like to be able to understand what kind of protections that actually provides our renters in our city. Because I was mind blown by that 27% that was flagged. That's insane.
Yeah, it's
wow.
It's big. And particularly considering the fact that there are 1,696 units of affordable housing, but there are 3,000 households that are talking about being living with $50,000 a year is significant.
Wow. Right.
But as for what protects what, I can certainly do some digging into the ACS data to see what exactly they break out the single family detached and things like that. I'm not sure that they indicate specifically which are condominiums and townhomes, but I'll spend a little bit of time with it and can get an answer back to you.
Cool, that's great. Yeah, and the question is like, how much does AB 1482 really protect our renters given this exemption? Great, thank you.
Of course, that's one of the things that we're really interested in, is making sure that we protect Palo Alto renters specifically. So that's one of the things that we're looking into in the future as well.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Vice Chair. Commissioner Riggs, followed by Commissioner Alchek.
Yeah, sorry. I have a lot of data questions, and I guess I need to understand your data a little more before I actually I'm not exactly sure what data source you're using. What you didn't talk about what geographic scale you're using. So can you explain a little more? Are you looking at this at the tract level, or the block group level, the block, city level? Because I think there's some baked in assumptions that based on the geographic scale.
Okay, city level is what I was looking at.
So if that's the case, then how do you crosswalk the income levels to the units?
You talk about,
you're talking about it in a super aggregate level. So you have to apply the income thresholds of the city to the units, to the unit breakdown. That's a messy, there's a lot of, anyway. So you look at it at the city level and you crosswalk the city income data to the city unit breakdown.
Right, and then they gave breakdowns for the city of what households were making what, broken into $5,000 increments, et cetera. And that those were household units that they were talking about. And so.
But you can't, at that aggregate scale, you can't assign the unit to you can't assign the income level to the unit at that scale. The crosswalk doesn't work like that. You either over or underestimate.
Okay. Great feedback. I appreciate it. And I will look into it.
Yeah, I think I would double and triple check. I think you really need to be looking at least the census tract scale, or else your crosswalk between income levels and units. Basically, you're applying aggregate numbers across the aggregate income levels to unit types, and it's just you're going to end up. Yeah, I just think that those numbers are not. I'm assuming it's 2018 data too.
Yes, correct.
2018 5-year. Yeah, I think you got to change the geographic scale.
Okay.
All right. Was that it for before public comment, Commissioner Wicks?
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Commissioner Alchek.
Hi. Hold on. Trying to. Okay, Lauren, would you do? I have a couple questions, and
Great.
you're gonna spend most of the time talking. So maybe I can just do them one at a time. Would you mind going back to the slide right before the COVID-19 protections?
Yes.
Yeah. Would you can you spend 2 minutes or so? If you're familiar, or if any of the staff members are, can you just tell us what these do?
So the Palo Alto Mediation Program essentially works with the community to provide non-legal help to the tenants and landlords so that they can avoid court, essentially. 1-year leases, the minimum term is 12 months, and that helps a lot of renters. As for tenant relocation assistance, that came about, I believe, on the dais in 2018 when we were talking about the President Hotel. And so those, I believe, are units, building size that have 50 units or more. But Albert, I am turning to you to double check me on that.
That's correct. That applies to structures that have 50 or more units.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, and then I had written down 2.25, but it was 2.55 as your residents per house. And I'm curious, how do we know that? Or
So,
how did you come up with that?
ACS, I would say that ACS data said that that is the average household size and for a residential unit. So as I mentioned, these are approximate numbers. And for number of people that are in these households. So when I talked about that 8,000 number that you and I came up with together, that is an approximate number.
Right.
Not, yeah.
Yeah, I get it.
Mm-hmm.
And then maybe I missed it, but do we have a median rental value? Do we know what median rent is?
And that's a great question. And it is a topic.
I mean, that's changing, right? That changes every week, but I wonder if there is any.
One, the data is old and is pre-COVID numbers. So we're talking about 2 years, and this is a completely different world. And so the 2018 numbers, ACS quoted it at 2,500. Policy Link, which is the organization that I work with, did used a framework called the Bay Area Equity Atlas, and they quoted that number as $6,000. So and they used ACS data and Zillow as well. So there are different numbers, and I didn't want to give you just one that wasn't right.
That's fine. I was just wanted to sort of piggyback off that answer. I think that's the right answer. By sharing that anybody who sort of wants to get a pulse on average or typical rents in Palo Alto can actually use the Zillow tool with great effect. You are not only can you sort of look up what's available now, you can distill it into categories depending on bedrooms, and I think you can look at historical data too, like what were some of the no longer available units listed for at this particular time.
Right.
And then I just wanted to jump in just so that if anybody in the community wants to talk about it, this is to Commissioner Rupivar. 1482 does exempt single family homes, townhouses, and condos, unless they're owned by corporations.
By corporation or or an LLC.
Yeah. So if it's a, an individual who is renting the space out, then the 1482 doesn't apply. But if it's a business or corporation, then it does. And interestingly, a lot of single family homes that are sort of put into, I guess, put to work, if you will, even if they're put to work by individuals, are often put in corporations, even if they're not what we think of when we think of large corporations. So it's more prevalent than you think, the application of 1482. And then my other question was, do we, and this, it would be interesting, I'm just going to say that I don't know that you know the answer, but it would be interesting to know if we have an ADU number. And I don't know that ACS could even provide that, and I'm not necessarily suggesting we track down every ADU, but it would be interesting to know, would that number come up as a duplex number, or like how would an ADU in the marketplace be represented?
That's a great question. So when they looked at the data, they said that single family attached, single family detached, then they went into duplexes, tris, and fours. So I can see where ADUs fall in those specific definitions and bring those back, because I think that's definitely interesting. And over the last couple of years, I imagine we don't have current data yet that would talk about ADUs as.
And I'll just say, because in case you haven't had this perspective yet, I think that there are the city's sort of hanging its hat on ADU being one of the tools to production,
right?
And to the extent that it actually is trackable, I think is relevant to sort of what you're doing. So I would be very interested to see what you come on with. Thank you for the presentation.
Agreed. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Alchek. Commissioner Suma.
Thank you. Really quickly, I think Commissioner Alchek asked one of my questions about tenant relocation, that it was not across the board. But I did want to ask about the one-year leases. My understanding, so you let me know if this is incorrect, is that 30-day, so month-to-month leases are allowed if both parties agree, the renter and the rentee. Is that correct?
I believe that is correct. I would also say that so before I did this work, I worked at Palo Alto Housing, now Alta Housing, and I worked in direct services with as the BMR administrator. So I spent a lot of time talking to renters about what they wanted. And not the only time, but most of the time, renters wanted longer leases for more stability for their household. And if they had month-to-month leases, the likelihood was that it was after they had been there for 12 months already, and then they had gone to month-to-month, and that had just kind of happened. So that has historically and anecdotally been the way I have experienced people's interactions with 12-month leases.
Okay, so we don't have any data on, so anecdotally, I've heard people kind of being forced into month-to-month, which puts them in a situation of less security.
Mhm.
But do we have any data on that? I understand that would be hard to get, but
Yeah, it would be difficult. And I think that's one of the reasons that we're so interested in talking to the renter community and strengthening that connection, both with the renter community and the PTC and renter community and city council, just so we can get more awareness of what people are going through. But again, that would be anecdotal rather than data. But anecdotal data is better than no data.
yeah. And then I think it's also true that the city of Palo Alto does not enforce the lease requirement. It's up to the renters to do that. Is that also, am I right on that?
Talk more about what you mean by force. Do you mean that we don't heavily enforce? Is that what you mean?
Maybe we can ask Albert to chime in on this one.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, so Commissioner Suma is correct. The city doesn't actively enforce that provision of its code. It creates a right for private tenants that they can enforce themselves, but there's no, it's not something that the city has someone assigned to.
Right. And that's one of the reasons that outreach and education is so important, so that the rental community actually understands what things that they can partake of.
Yeah. Okay. That's my questions for now. Thank you.
Thank you
Thank
very much.
you. I have a question too, and I do want to get to our public commenters. Commissioner Riggs, do you?
Yeah, I need to apologize to Lauren. I'm sorry, I was completely misreading your, I understand what you were doing now between slide 11 and 12. And I'm super sorry. You did not have, I was wrong. So I thought you were changing geographic scales there and going and drilling down. So I apologize. I just reran your numbers. So my bad. Apologies. I just wanted to put that
I
on the record.
appreciate the feedback. So thank you
yeah,
for
no,
rerunning the numbers.
I thought we were doing a geospatial step down. So I appreciate you being patient with me.
Of course.
That is good to know. Thank you for clarifying that. All right, so I just have a couple of questions. So the 1-year lease is a topic that we were just discussing with Commissioner Suma. That is that they're required to offer a 1-year lease, right? Not that they couldn't decide on something else.
Say the last part again.
So the 1-year lease item that you had in your presentation in Palo Alto is that the landlord is required to offer a 1-year lease, right? They could decide later after offering it to do month to month or something else. Okay.
I believe that the option is available to them.
Okay. And then I had a couple of just clarifying questions, then I want to go to the public comments. So do we have any information on the rate of evictions, like how many people are being evicted in Palo Alto in a given period of time?
No, Matthew Desmond spent a little bit of time from the book Evicted. He spent a little bit of time creating something called the Evictions Lab, and he's been tracking data for evictions. He says only 2 have happened in Palo Alto, and I know that's wrong. So it is, I think, and again, this is me talking about my experiences, that I think a lot of folks get an eviction notice and they're gone. They don't want to pursue it legally because that's an additional stress and expense to them. So it's a hard thing to track, but definitely very interesting.
I think that'd be interesting to find ways to track that, if it does trigger people changing homes or something. It'd be interesting to have that data, because then we'd know the size of the problem, right?
Yeah.
And then of your large percentage of people living at the poverty level, and I was just wondering, we do have a large percentage of our population in Palo Alto is eligible retirement age. Do we think that they count for a significant portion of that poverty level income?
Right. So the best I can say is potentially, just because we looked at when the ACS data doesn't attach to any like age or anything. It doesn't attach to, it doesn't look at household size specifically or age of the tenants or anything like that. So it'd be difficult to kind of get at that data.
Could we get it through census perhaps? Like age versus income? That might be another level to add to your analysis, because that was the first thing I thought is who might those people be and what can we do for them, you know? So
right. And
okay.
when I worked at Alta Housing, I did have a fair number of folks who were on Social Security and retirement income. Generally, if they were living here, they were doing fairly well. They had been here for a while, but if they tried to downsize, things like that, it became difficult for them.
Interesting. All right. Thank you very much for this presentation. We're going to come back with another round of questions.
Oh, okay. I can wait. It's fine.
Yes, don't worry. I just want to give the public has been so patient. And then we'll come back to the commissioners for their next round of questions. So, Mr. Nguyen, would you like to conduct public comment?
Yes, we have 4 speakers. The first one will be Angie, followed by Anil, followed by Ryan, and then followed by Kevin Ma, and then followed by Rebecca Eisenberg. If there's anyone else who wants to speak, whose name I did not call, please raise your hand now. Otherwise, Rebecca will be our last speaker. Okay, up first, Angie. Angie, can you please unmute yourself when you may speak?
Oh, did I do it?
Yes, we can hear you. Thank you.
Okay, great. So I have a whole public comment that I was going to say, but I wanted to first start with my first point. So most tenant groups have actually gone back and rescinded support for 1-year leases because they've proven to be really ineffective because they were all passed as sole loan policies instead of paired with something. My first point. And then my second point is really to Lauren's point, you cannot effectively collect data on economic evictions. I've talked to at least 3 renters in the last month with current evictions. So we know that the data is never going to be accurate around evictions. So that's it. All right, so to my whole public comment thing. I'm Angie, I'm a renter in Crescent Park in Palo Alto. I've got 2 kids, I've got a dog, it's really great. I'm calling in tonight because one of the issues I've focused on since moving to the Bay Area is renters' rights. One of the first things that really surprised me when I moved here was just how few renter protections there were. There are very little stability and dignity for renters here. We're nearly half of the residents in Palo Alto and 60% of the POSD students. I said 60% of our public school students are renters. I know that because I called the registrar and asked, or I had someone else call the registrar and ask. And our voices are really not represented on commissions like this one. They're rarely in elected office. So the Bay Area is lauded as this progressive hub, but until we actually pass policies that recognize renters in every city deserve fair, stable, and predictable rents, we really can't claim that political philosophy. So I hope that this body and others in Palo Alto will take advantage of having a dedicated fellow to really do this work, because we need things that prevent the loss of rental homes, apartments, and renters in our city, and mitigation is what we often do, and it's just not enough. So lastly, I want to say that I hope we're building out a policy framework that we can begin to recognize just how flawed means testing is. Since helping to form the Palo Alto Renters Association, I get about 3 to 5 emails or Facebook messages a week, and many of them are residents who need help and they can't qualify for it or they're scared to fill out the forms. All these additional hoops really make us feel better when we're providing services, but they don't make the services more effective. And I also just wanted to, I didn't get to speak in the last agenda item, but I want to second or third Billy Riggs' point. We can't view any of these issues in a vacuum. And in order to address the housing crisis, we're going to have to protect current renters, produce more affordable and market rate housing. And doing one or the other it's not only incomplete, it's really just bad public policy. Yes, I nailed that timer. Okay, guys, you get 17 seconds back. Thank you.
Thank you, Angie, for your comments. Our next speaker will be Anil. Anil, if you're there, can you please unmute yourself?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Thank you. Hi, Planning Commission. Thank you for allowing me to speak today. My name is Anil Babar with the California Apartment Association. I wanted to speak today on the topic at hand. In the past year, there have been two significant legislative actions which you've touched upon that have had a stabilizing impact on the rental housing market. AB 1482, which was passed last year, enacted a statewide rent cap of 5% plus CPI and just cause. For Santa Clara County, that rent cap is 6% right now. The Turner Center found that a cap of 5% plus CPI would provide a meaningful protection for tenants while allowing owners to earn a profit. This rent cap provides a fair and predictable rent increase for tenants every year. And CASA, the regional effort, also endorsed this rent cap measure. AB 3308, the other legislative bill that took place this year, the Tenant Protection Act, passed, would provide eviction protections through January of 2021. Both bills we partnered with the legislature on. To speak for a second about median rents in the city of Palo Alto, the city staff report that was issued indicated that rents were at $2,400, give or take a few dollars, back in 2018. I can tell you today, given the data we've pulled through CoStar, a nationwide rent tracking firm, that asking rents which are usually higher than in-place rents for tenants, currently is about $200 less than that level that you've indicated in 2018. It's currently about $2,200 as we speak, and it's forecast to drop over the next few years as the COVID impact is going to affect rental housing markets, and existing leases will mature, and when they get renewed, we'll definitely see a decrease in average rents. Lastly, I want to touch upon the notion that this effort is really going to engage the renter community. All the recommendations I've seen produced by PolicyLink in other jurisdictions greatly impact the ownership community as well. And I don't think any effort to meaningfully understand renter protections can be done so without engaging the rental housing community to understand how this impacts the owners and their ability to manage their properties. I can tell you that given the recent COVID crisis, many owners are facing foreclosure because of their inability to make their mortgages, make their expenses, make their maintenance costs because of many tenants unable to pay their rent. So as you go through this process, it's important to remember not only to engage the renter community, but also the landlord community as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Anil. Our next speaker will be Ryan. Ryan, can you please unmute yourself?
Good evening, commissioners. My name is Ryan Globus. I live in Midtown and I rent a single family home. So I have a variety of points I want to address. One is that the 1 year lease requirement. I know Angie, said that she's heard differently from folks in the community, but for me personally, I love having a 1 year lease, having that stability, knowing, we can plan a little bit more, have that stability, know we'll be here, know the rent will be the same. But I was a little bit shocked to find out that the 1 year lease does not apply to single family homes in Palo Alto. I didn't know that until I read the municipal code. And again, that's about a third of the renters or the housing units in Palo Alto. So that's a pretty big gap that we should probably fill. Second, I want to talk about rent control. So yes, the statewide cap does not apply to many single family homes. However, if Prop 21 passes this November, it would let cities apply rent control to single family homes if the landlord owns more than 2 units. So potentially Prop 21 could expand that, but it would require Palo Alto to take action. So I think we could partially fill in the gap of AB 1482 if Prop 21 passes. I also want to add that, we saw that a lot of renters in Palo Alto are rent burdened, and, our neighboring communities have rent control that's lower than the statewide cap. I know there's strong pros and cons for rent control. It's not as simple as passing a law, but I think we should very seriously consider Palo Alto having its own rent control law to better suit our community, especially when rents are so high. The third thing I want to add is that, the President Hotel and the eviction of all of those tenants was something really awful in the Palo Alto community. And so I know that our hands are a bit tied by state law, but it would be nice to have staff try to work on solutions to prevent that from happening in the future at other apartment buildings. And finally, I just want to add, there's this $2,400, $2,600 number being thrown around. And as someone who has looked for rental housing recently in Palo Alto, this just doesn't, it seems a little bit unbelievable to me. I'll add that a lot of tenants, myself included, have pets, or I don't have kids, but many tenants do. And so that often restricts what kind of places you can move into. And so what you're actually able to find is going to be much more expensive than that. So please keep that in mind. Again, just a high level summary, fill in the gaps for single family homes, 1-year leases and rent control, and prevent another President Hotel. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ryan, for joining us tonight. Our next speaker will be Kevin.
Hello, PTC commissioners. My name is Kevin Ma, he, him. I am a renter in Ventura. However, I am probably not on the survey of renters because I rent a room in an owner-occupied single-family home. So there's going to be a lot of us that are going to be left out, which brings to the point of, as people have brought up, data is inaccurate because guess what? We don't have a rent registry. In fact, we should probably have a rent registry, except for groups like the California Apartment Association rejecting it because guess what? They defend landlords and their money, not tenants. In fact, we should be doing more for tenants because as we can tell from our current protections, 1482 and stuff like that are good on paper, but in practice, you're going to need law assistance because like 3088 is the law that just got passed for the eviction moratorium. It actually has a section that extends 1482 until February for almost everyone in the state. But unfortunately, these are so nuanced and most people aren't lawyers, so they're not going to have this kind of information on hand. And the threat alone of an eviction is enough to basically kick people out. As such, we should be focusing on more direct action things like actually funding a source of legal assistance. The mediation program is nice in paper, but it's basically toothless. You're trying to get a person who has all the power, which is the landlord, and the tenant to try to get an agreement. It's going to be on the landlord side. It's not even mandatory mediation. We saw that in Mountain View that Measure W, which was basically their mediation program, was rejected by the voters in favor of Measure V, which was actually a rent control program that was supported by a majority of their people. As such, rent control is a solution. One of the solutions to this current crisis. It's not obvious an end solution. The end solution is more housing and more support for tenants' rights so we don't get threatened by eviction. But stuff like that, like rent control, like Prop 21, are things that are here to stop the bleeding, honestly, because tenants have been really screwed over by most of our policies. Everything is basically homeowner focused, especially from this PTC council. None of you are renters, so none of you actually know what people are going through because city council and y'all don't really care so much about the 45% that are in this city. As such, we should be doing stronger measures regarding things like stronger tenant protections, stronger at cause or just cause regulations, or actually decent tenant relocation assistance. Because if we want to be the progressive community we are, we should be able to allow all members of society to be in the city, not at risk of being kicked out or driven off the streets. Because as we also see, there's a lot of RV residents because they want to be within this community, but can't afford the rents. So thank you.
Thank you, Kevin, for joining us. Our next speaker will be Rebecca.
Hi there. Thank you so much for having this study session on such a truly important topic. First, I want to thank Commissioner Riggs, well, all of you for having this study session, but in particular, Commissioner Riggs for pointing out the triple obligations that our city needs to focus on, that of producing affordable housing, preserving existing affordable housing, as other speakers, I think Angie pointed out, was not done with the hotel president. And also the third prong is protecting tenants. I want to point out, Neil spoke earlier saying that you should ask tenants and landlords, Well, hello, I am a tenant and a landlord. Because of the somewhat regressive implications of Prop 13, we actually still own our home in San Francisco that we initially bought when we couldn't afford to buy in Palo Alto, which we still can't afford to do. But to even move down here, we rent out that home in San Francisco and we rent in our single family home here in Palo Alto. So I guess I'm here to say not only am I a tenant and a landlord, I'm also part of that 27% of tenants who rent single family homes, and also the part of that 17% of tenants who pay more than 30% of our income on housing, which I have to tell you sucks, especially with 2 kids, hopefully entering college within the next couple of years. But most importantly, I want to say that Palo Alto does not have sufficient tenant protection. This study group is about tenant protection, but I didn't see any actual tenant protection proposed. So I want to toss out here some ideas that similar cities do that I think Palo Alto should consider as well. One of them is expanding. Oh wait, before I do that, I want to say as to landlords. Landlords actually, I hope that you will discount a lot of statements from landlords claiming poverty, because the PPP loans and SBA loans offered by CARES were widely and generously available to landlords. Landlords have had capacity, and many landlords actually took advantage of those loans, which were offered by the government, to be reimbursed for losses caused by tenants who no longer can afford to live there. So keep that in mind when landlords say that they're poor because of the pandemic. It's really the tenants who are hit much harder, and the tenants who actually live here, while landlords often live outside of Palo Alto. But real quick, as to potential tenant protections, we need stronger protection against eviction that is continued past when the moratorium is going to expire. And we should look into pricing protection for people who not just live in the small number of apartment units, but also the single family homes and townhouses. I don't have time to say more, but I really appreciate your time looking at this. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Rebecca, for your comments. Our last speaker will be Rohan. Rohan, looks like you're using an older version of Zoom, so I actually can't unmute you. Instead, what we'll have to do is I will temporarily promote you to panelist so you can turn on your microphone.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Thank you.
Hi, I would like to echo a lot of what what previous speakers have said, and kind of expressed very strong support for actually moving on implementing renter protections in Palo Alto.
Excuse me, speaker, could you please turn off your video? You've got campaign material there. Thank you.
We have seen, like, we've seen in this community fairly repeated incidents of a lot of displacement occurring and people being priced out of this community. And as a student, I've seen it firsthand in the school district system with a lot of my fellow students at Pali being just having to move out and change schools due to a lack of renter protections in this community. So as previous speakers have said, rental registry, stronger enforcement of just cause, enforcement of AB 1482, and exploring options such as rent stabilization are things that the city of Palo Alto really needs to start exploring. Thank you.
Thank you, Rohan, for your comments. And Chair Templeton, that concludes public comments for this item.
All right, thank you so much. Now we'll go back to commissioners. You can raise your hands. I see Commissioner Riggs.
Okay, good. I just actually I have a question, and we don't need to belabor it, but so Lauren, this is just going back to some of the what's covered, what's not covered in the numbers, and part of this is I actually don't know if there's any. How are group quarters factored into these numbers? And I'm assuming that the President Hotel might have been classified group quarters, but any SRO would be classified like that. And I don't even know how many parcels in Palo Alto would fit in that qualification.
I don't know, is the quick answer. And so the question is about group quarters, so SROs.
Well, there's any number. I mean, this goes to kind of some of the things on the prior item that like that's clergy, that's it's any kind of student housing. Technically, I guess a single family home. It's kind of like what some of the speakers mentioned, a single family home with multiple parties who are unrelated living in it would be classified as group quarters. So I'm not clear how that factors in. And I would think it would be really interesting. And another thing is, one thing that struck me is, and I'm clearly, is how I'm curious if there's any, never mind. That'll get us way in the weeds. So I'm gonna hold off there. I'll stop there.
And also my contact information is at the end of the slide. If we want to continue any conversations, I'm more than happy to talk about any of this.
No, I think just figuring out the group quarters and making sure we're not missing a small segment, similar to what Commissioner Alchek said about kind of how our ADUs factored in here. Really important.
Sure, absolutely.
All right, commissioners, raise your hands if you would like to have another round of comments. Commissioner Alchek.
Not that I support the argument of landlord poverty or anything, but the member of the public who mentioned that's the first I've heard of that. And I would be interested to receive sort of data on landlord use of PPP loans. That's an interesting comment. And it's the first I've heard of it. And I'm relatively informed on the industry. So if that commentator could, send her data to the commission, I'd review it just to understand that better. Also, I want to make a point that I think anyone that received, I don't know what it was, maybe more than $10,000 in the PPP loans. I don't know what the threshold was, but it wasn't that high. You can look up by zip code. So we could theoretically, actually, I don't know if it depends. I guess if the landlord doesn't live in Palo Alto, that could be a problem. But that would be interesting in the broader perspective of a discussion about COVID relief for renters to understand what extent landlords are receiving separate COVID relief from the government. I mention that because I sort of continue to be confused about how we will eventually come to terms with the sort of COVID relief that we put in place. It seems, incredibly necessary to create those protections. At the same time, if, for example, there are individuals in Palo Alto who are benefiting from the time they're being given to rent or to remain in their housing unit, despite maybe being unable to pay their rent, what does that mean for the landlords who rely on it? The perfect example was that speaker, right? If maintaining her rent in Palo Alto is, if a significant portion of the income she uses for her own living is, earned from rental housing, what happens, right? And so we've created a sort of local assistance program and statewide assistance program, and I think it's I think there's a question as to how long we can do that. How many months of can that go on? I think one of my questions, and this would have been for a lot of the speakers, is what specific rent control programs do they feel like they're missing? I personally feel that 1482's approach statewide there's a benefit to having a statewide program because it creates sort of a more uniform basis for renters and landlords to engage, and it's not uncommon for renters to move frequently, and so and in a lot of ways people don't. I mean, I wonder. I it may be anecdotal, but I think that renters do frequently move across city lines, despite the sort of close proximity of maybe their residences, right? And so there's some benefit to sort of uniformity. But I would be interested to know is when the speakers tonight spoke about greater renter protection, are they suggesting that the 5% threshold isn't significant enough, or are they uncomfortable with its inapplicability to single family homes that are rented out by private owners as opposed to corporations? And then I wonder if we could also have some data about what percentage of eviction is, I don't know if this is even fine, whether you'd be able to put this together, but it would be interesting to know how many no fault evictions are occurring in Palo Alto. No fault eviction becomes more and more important as rent control becomes greater, because you worry that landlords will attempt to bring their units to market through whatever means possible, right? And we have to make sure that there aren't sort of easy efforts that landlord, I need to remodel the unit, and they displace somebody, and the real purpose of that displacement is to bring the unit to market, right? So as our rent control policies become stricter, our awareness of how individuals can still achieve sort of a market rent and we need to hone that. So it would be interesting to know what extent we are experiencing that in the city, no fault evictions, as opposed to at fault evictions, which are sort of a different animal. And I think that would help us understand what sort of policies we should pursue to potentially limit that occurrence. And then I would also, and maybe this is just Palo Alto specific, and maybe this is COVID specific, but I think if we're going to, I think we can't really avoid that discussion. I think we should have some understanding of how the rental market has changed post-COVID. So one of the sort of theories behind having the 1-year lease, right, this concept of stability, is that before 1482, a landlord could, in theory, increase rent every month if they didn't have a 1-year lease, right? You could get a rental increase, and 2 months later there could be another rental increase, and 2 months later could be another rental increase. And 1482 basically said, regardless of whether you have a 1-year lease or not, month to month or whatnot, increases are capped at 5%. So I'd be interested to better understand what benefits, and you sort of spoke from experience, saying that you had it was your impression that people really preferred it. I'd be curious to know if that perception is sort of a relic of pre-1482 experiences or not. And obviously, if you're in a single family home and it's not affected by that, then it's a different sort of opinion. But particularly now, which my read on the rental market in the Bay Area, we're seeing a lot of a significant decline in the in the rental values that are out there, and tons of promotions, free months, 2 free months, and so. But maybe that doesn't exist in Old Palo Alto. Maybe there's only like 7 homes in Old Palo Alto that are rented, and so that market is pretty in demand. So that kind of brings me full circle to that idea that we maybe try to understand, although it's not necessarily relevant looking forward, even recent historical data on rental values, and further, like what promotions and how fluid is the market right now, and what vacancy do we have. I think that the 1482 came late. I'm sure everyone can remember that article, 2016, maybe 2017, in the San Francisco Chronicle about a guy that got like a $4,000 rental increase or $3,000 rental increase in San Francisco. So 1482 came a little late because between 2011 and 2017, that's when we saw just significant increases in rental on rates. And I make that point only to suggest that the impact of what we're doing now may not really be visible today, but in 3 or 4 years, or maybe longer, as the market recovers, that's when these things are going to matter. And so I think we have to appreciate that context. And then the last comment I want to make, Lauren, is that I think there's this housing institute. I'm blanking on the name of it. It's out of Berkeley, UC Berkeley, and they do a lot of studies on
Turner Institute.
Turner Institute.
Yeah, and I've come across so many of their sort of presentations that are really informative, and I have to be honest, I don't fully appreciate your role yet. But if there's going to be a link on our planning commission page, or maybe the city, I don't even know. In an ideal world, there'll be a web page devoted to what you're doing that provides a lot of information about what you're working on and what we have in place. And I would just suggest to you that would be a good place maybe to link articles from that institute that really illuminate the sort of discussion, particularly the comment by one of our public speakers today about the California Apartments Association, or CA, whatever. I'm not sure what organization you mentioned, but the suggestion that there's a lot of money on both sides of this issue, maybe, or there's a lot of money on one side of this issue, and I think that organization that I mentioned out of Berkeley has done a really good job of helping folks understand the nuance in some of these more complicated policies. And I certainly would benefit from having that stuff in our discussion. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much, Commissioner Alcheck. Commissioner Lowing, followed by Commissioner Suma.
Thanks much. And thanks to staff for bringing this extraordinarily important issue to our attention and finally having a resource to put on it to drive action in this area. It's long overdue. It's crucial. 45% of the people are renters, and I'd just like to address any member of the public that spoke or that's listening or that listens to this later. This commission is highly attentive to those 45%. It is true that, to my knowledge, there's no renter on here, but that doesn't mean that we don't really feel that pain, because we are very much feeling the pain of affordable housing. And without affordable housing to move into, the only option to get folks in here that have low incomes is through rental. And that is an objective, I think it's a moral objective that we have as a city. So doing things to primarily protect renters in that list of Ps, I think is what Lauren is charged to do. And it's very helpful. Just also want to comment on that we have our own little petri dishes to be studying this, even though we're not renters. I've got my own focus group of 3 kids who are in California trying to figure out how to move into houses and make changes because the rent went up, and now, actually a week ago, one made a change because the rent went down. And with COVID, she can't go to the office and they need 2 bedrooms instead of 1. So all these changes, that's one of my views into it. And it's just, I just want to assure the public that it's extraordinarily heartfelt on this commission and in this commissioner. The other thing I want to just make a statement on that I think we're all alluding to, and I just want to state it strongly. Removing housing stock is evil. We just can't do that. And we have to plug any loophole that allows that to happen. I'm not addressing the icon of the President's Hotel. I'm saying any loophole that still exists, including redevelopment of putting in, nice new units, has to stop removing housing. And a lot of the housing that's removed is the most affordable. As one of the speakers said, if the average is 2,300, that's an average. And it's probably more like, in my judgment, it's about $1,000 more than that. But the very low cost housing at $1,000 is the stuff that's going to get ripped out to put in new housing. And we can't do that. So that has to be changed in the ordinances wherever that exists. Just had one question on packet page 21. So I take it, Lauren, that our list is not produced yet of the items. You say that everybody has a long list of what's on there for, when you say Oakland has 7 and somebody else has 14 in terms of.
Are we talking about the just cause evictions, the reasons for them?
Yeah.
So the ones that fall into ours would be from 1482. And so those exist and include some of the ones that I had laid out there as non-payment of rent and breaking your lease, things like that. But there's certainly more information about what at-cause evictions are acceptable reasons for an eviction under just cause evictions.
Okay, and I want to confirm that just because I also want to reference one letter we got late. There were a number of letters that came to us, but one letter we got late from Miss Emily LaCroix, if I'm pronouncing it correctly. And it's just a very sad case study that we heard about someone who's basically, according to her testimony, she's had to stay in a below 50 degrees Fahrenheit apartment. Now, in that regard, isn't there some way that we have sort of immediate recourse to that? But for privacy reasons, could we not have sort of a whistleblower hotline that could call the city so that somebody, I don't know who, that's up to you guys, but it could be, somebody from utilities saying, we heard that these furnaces off in here or something, to provide the privacy so that there's no retribution taken on that tenant. Is
Right.
that in place, or if not, could you make a note to, maybe that's one of the things you could fix?
So you can essentially do code enforcement and make reports about things that are going on at your property, but there are all sorts of repercussions to that, and doing so.
I will add though, for a code enforcement complaint, or if someone does file for code enforcement, it is completely anonymous. Whoever does make that complaint is completely, no information is revealed about who that person is.
And proactive code enforcement is actually one renter protection that people talk about. So there are all sorts of things that we could explore about what we think are applicable and the best renter protections for Palo Altans.
So I think that's, as I said earlier, of the 3 Ps, I think that's to be your main charge is the protection. We've got other ways that we need to work on, providing more stock and so on. But, thanks for being here. I salute you, and come back to us as often as you need input. It's noble work, and it's really, really important.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Commissioner Lowing. Commissioner Suma?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I just wanted to thank Ms. Bigelow for being here and helping us with this problem. It is really a problem in Palo Alto for renters. And I am not a renter, but I don't live in an R1 neighborhood. So a lot of my neighbors are renters, and a lot of renters live in the same place for a very, very long time. And then we have, I think because of Stanford and the nature of the tech community, we have a lot of more transient renters. And so they have very different needs to me. And I agree with that protecting renters should be one of the key goals of this program. I don't think there's a big problem with evictions in Palo Alto, but the unaffordability creates a eviction-like process where people can't afford it anymore. And I know anecdotally that many people are forced to go month to month instead of having the security of a one-year lease. And they are afraid to even ask for it because they're afraid they'll be kicked out in a month. And in terms of, I think our enforcement of our law should be much stronger. I know that that's a policy that the city council will have to direct staff to do, but it is not practical for any renter to undertake a lawsuit about not being given an opportunity for a one-year lease. It just isn't going to happen because they're going to be kicked out before the timing doesn't allow for any sort of protection in the process. So I would really like that to be looked at very strongly. I also think one of my colleagues touched on this, but I also think there's a lot of informal renting situations in Palo Alto, and it's probably more than it used to be, but it's always been this way where people rent rooms in houses and such not. And I think that census and other kind of data collection processes don't collect that. So I would say that at least half of Palo Alto probably are renters. And yeah, this is very, very important. I don't know if it's going to be possible to collect better data on that, but in as much as we can, I think we should. And there was some stigma previously with renting rooms in your houses and neighborhoods that might not have allowed that, so people weren't reporting it. I think there may be a little bit more leeway now in people feeling that they could enforce that. So I would like to see more local enforcement of our laws. I think that rent control is a very tricky subject and needs to be looked at very carefully. I also think that when we say, I think it was a data point that you gave us, that 37% of our residents are spending more than a third of their income on housing. I think that I would like to see a breakdown of that data at income levels, because somebody at a low income level spending a third of their money on housing impacts whether they have enough to spend on food and medicine. Someone at a very high income level, it doesn't have the same effect. So I think to understand the impacts of that properly, we should understand that. And yeah, we can't ever let something like the Hotel President happen again. That was a shameful mistake on our city's part. And protecting and preserving existing housing. And yeah, so I'm just interested in your timeline and your outreach and how you're going to plan all this. And I look forward to hearing more about this as you go forward, but I'm really glad that we are addressing this issue. Thanks.
So just a point of clarification on the chart that breaks down the income and how many of them are cost burdened in that income bracket. You can see that any households that are making less than $75,000 a year, they're between 70 to 90% of them are unfortunately cost burdened. And so the reason, it's difficult to say exactly what the reason is that average is 37%, but looking at those higher numbers, the lower that you get with those incomes, the more that cost burden skyrockets amongst the amongst the percentage of those that are in that income bracket. And so they're a little bit, so they're there. It's more difficult to tie them to, like, does this qualify as low income or what have you, because generally Santa Clara County's area median income numbers are based on your household size, and we don't have that information for the households. So it's difficult to kind of get granular with those. We can make suppositions based on the fact that the 2015 housing element said that 95% of the rental units had between 1 and 4 individuals in them. But again, that's not a perfect way to look at data either. So it's just kind of making small leaps to get to final places, and making sure that you do it in a way that is truthful.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that.
Thank you, Commissioner Suma. Commissioner Heckman.
Thank you, and thank you, Ms. Bigelow, for the report and the presentation. I guess I have a macro question. Let me ask my question, then I'll explain it. And frankly, I'm not sure if this question is for staff or it's for the commissioners, all of whom have been doing this commissioner work longer than I have. So the question is, where are we going? And to explain what I mean by that, we know anecdotally from living here in Palo Alto and from being a part of this community and reading the paper that we have significant rental issues. The rents are too high. There's not enough affordable rental housing for the people who want to live here, for the people who would benefit for them to live here. We know that as rents increase, some people who are renters are forced out. And so we know all those things, we have that qualitative picture. So now we have this fellow, and we're getting quantitative data that can illuminate that and inform us. And I think that's terrific. And I understand the efforts are going to continue. This is just sort of our first view of this stuff, and the numbers are going to be refined. And I think we've had a lot of good comments from commissioners to help that refinement process. But what I'm wondering is, what are we going to do with the data? Are we going to modulate our response to this problem based upon what the data tells us? So for example, if how bad the rental situation is measured on a scale of 1 to 10, with 10 being the worst, are we going to have a different policy response if it turns out Palo Alto is an 8 versus a 5? You know, I would think that's the point of collecting the data, but I don't know that we're going to be able to parse that. And if we can't, then I'm wondering, basically, what are we waiting for in terms of starting the policy discussions? Let the data, you know, dovetail the policy discussions. But if we're not going to be modulating our response, then let's get on to talking about the response. So that's the question. I don't know if that's something any of the commissioners are interested in discussing. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Heckman.
Am
Anyone
I
else?
supposed to respond, or
yes,
no?
you're welcome to respond.
Okay. So one of the basic tenets of racial equity work is centering people first, and so we want to make sure that we talk to individuals and see what their needs are. And so it's really pairing stories with data, and so we are embarking on this journey together where we have gotten the data and we are getting the stories. And so hopefully that can help us shape a policy response that will impact the community in ways that are helpful rather than just creating policy. Oftentimes when policy is created, there's kind of a disconnect in how it's directly applied. And so a lot of not a lot, but I would say that we benefit greatly by trying to shape policy in a way that's responsive to the needs of the community.
Thank you. Commissioner Heckman, did you have any additional comments? Your hand is still up.
Sorry, I did not.
Okay, that's no problem. Commissioner Alchek.
Yeah, I'll bite. I think it's a good question. I don't know that we need a ton of analysis. You know, I guess the question is what sphere of influence should we even begin having a conversation in? I'm not sure how the commission weighs in on renter protection policy related to eviction or rental increase rate, limits. And I think one of the things that I thought of while you were talking was, to what extent is the rental environment terrible in Palo Alto, or I would add the peninsula or the Bay Area? To what extent is that a feature of inadequate renter protection law, which I don't believe this commission is really equipped to evaluate? And to what extent is that environment, is that issue related to the shortage of housing, and an area that I think the commission is particularly well suited to have a discussion about, how to address that issue. Earlier tonight, someone mentioned in the open comment height limits, and I think I'm not bringing that up now, other than to suggest to you that I think our sphere of influence relates significantly to what what policies the city should consider in their effort to address a housing shortage, which is to maybe an unquantifiable extent contributor to this renter problem. Most of the time, most of the time we're going to have these discussions. I think that we're going to experience, anecdotal contributions that will pull at our heartstrings and will potentially demonstrate our lack of ability to empathize, because, I think someone mentioned quite articulately, most of us are not renters. But I also recognize that comment that Commissioner Lowing said, which is, and I believe this applies to a lot of Palo Alto residents, which is that many Palo Alto residents may have children that are my age that are unable to sort of live in the peninsula. And I mention the peninsula just because this is not a Palo Alto problem. This is a regional problem. And it's such a fallacy to assume that we can address rental issues in Palo Alto without addressing them in the entire Bay Area. And that's why I tend to favor approaches when it comes to rental protection that are more regional or statewide, because the renter is a more fluid population, and the extent to which their uniform policies gives them greater awareness and experience, as opposed to each city sort of having a different approach. Not suggesting that we don't need to address some of our problems. And I would, suggest that the loss of the President's Hotel, that's a pretty uniquely Palo Alto problem. But I'm not really, I just want to sort of acknowledge your question, which is, I don't know that we have a large role to play in advising the council on what specific policies they should adopt to protect renters. unless it has to do with like preservation, guidelines that, for example, with respect to the President's Hotel, what policies should we enact to make sure, we had a comment by Commissioner Lowing about, not losing housing, even for replacement housing. Well, I think that's a debate we could have. You're going to tear down 4 units. Well, then you better put up 8. And we recommend that the council require that every time you demolish a housing unit, you double the replacement, it doubles it. That's an area where I think we can have sort of a conversation, and we don't need to wait for data. I don't need to know how many evictions in Palo Alto are at fault to inform that discussion. I sort of interpreted this presentation tonight as keeping our commission in the loop on an area that's like related to so much of what we do, because it affects so many residents, and it has to do with housing. That's why I suggested to you that if there's a website, here's what I would put on it, and here's how you can keep the general public informed. I didn't sort of anticipate that if you brought that stuff to me, I could do something with it. I don't feel particularly empowered to do that. However, I would love, and this is something Lauren can't really say yes or no to, but I would love it if our staff and our city council would give us the opportunity to talk about, what would have to happen for us to, what sort of preservation laws can we create? What sort of incentives can we create to address the supply? And I think we've had that conversation. We had a conversation just a couple of weeks ago about, you very eloquently, Commissioner Heckman, represented the commission at a city council item the other night, where you mentioned in your comments that, the rules related to affordability, you would recommend increasing those thresholds, requiring developers to increase the quantity, percentage of affordable housing units. This is an issue related to renters, but not in the absence of considering all these levers that we had a really, vivid discussion, interesting discussion about. And so I think your question really drives at the heart of what's been a difficult thing to acknowledge, which is in my 8 or 9, I think almost 9 years now on this commission, we keep sort of flying around this issue, and not much has changed. And every time I hear someone lament the President's Hotel, I want to scream at the top of my lungs, you couldn't build the President's Hotel today without getting shot, down 100 times, 100 bullets by every person, it feels like, in this community. And it seems to me like the ultimate irony that the President's Hotel is the greatest loss, that it gets articulated by every individual that it really is familiar with the issue. And at the same time, nobody's up in arms about the fact that you couldn't build in one right next door. And why? Because parking is inadequate. It's a perfectly inadequate building that we love, that does so many things well. And my suggestion to you is that we are having a hard time making headway because perfect is the enemy of good. And so I guess my response to your question is, I'd like to have the opportunity to participate, not in a colleague's memo, but in an actual commission-led discussion where we make recommendations on addressing this problem from the perspective of our zoning rules, and do just what you sort of suggested we wanted the council to give us the right to do. I just think we keep asking, and it doesn't happen. I've spoken for a long enough time, but I think that's all I have to say.
Thank you, Commissioner Alchek. I'll chime in and say that it may not always be planning commissions. In other cities, for example, they have bodies that are set up to hear and recommend on issues with the renter community. So I think finding a way to present it with some options to council might be appropriate. If they want us to work on it, great. If they want to start up another board, maybe that's the right thing to do. I think it's an interesting idea of trying to encourage council to place it somewhere so we can have more discussion about it, especially because it's about almost half of our community. So that's something to think about. And then Ms. Bigelow, I have a question for you as well. So we talked a little bit about data earlier, and that we don't really have data on evictions. We also don't really have data on these rental shares, the idea of roommates, for example. Is there any precedent that you're aware of how we can understand that better? And I'm particularly thinking about potential abuses of maybe too many people are sharing the same dwelling, that kind of thing. We've seen that recently in San Mateo. Yeah, I'm just wondering what thoughts you have there and what we should be looking at in terms of regulations or ordinances and things like that.
So the ACS data does look at overcrowding to some degree, but I would also say that again, then you're always going to run into this issue where the numbers are older than you want them to be. And so particularly given where we've been in the last 6 months and how things have changed for everybody. And so I thought it was an excellent point to try and look at how the rental market has shifted since COVID has come into play in our lives. But regarding people renting rooms and things like that, I can certainly look into it and see if there are any numbers out there that reflect that reality.
And what do you know about the red tag ordinance kind of in response to this? Are you familiar with this? This is
very little.
Very little. It might be worth looking into. It was interesting. It was in the paper a few months ago. It's really
San
about
Mateo's, right?
Yes, exactly. And it's about how can landlords help with relocation if their facilities are substandard or overcrowded.
Great. Okay.
Yeah, that would be great. Okay. Any other comments from commissioners? All right. Well, thank you very much, Ms. Bigelow, for the presentation. It definitely got us engaged and excited. We do love our renter community. I know we heard members of the public wondering, and so I think it's great that we've heard so many commissioners express that sentiment that we love you too. It's sometimes hard for us to address these issues, and you gave us an excellent reason to do so with this agenda item. So I appreciate it, Ms. Bigelow.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, guys. Have a great night.
All right. Bye. Okay, so this agenda item is closed. Let me get my little packet here, and we will go next to the minutes. Would anyone like to make a motion on the minutes?
I move to approve the minutes. Sorry.
Thank you. Commissioner Heckman, I see your hand raised.
Yes, I'd like to. I don't know if I can offer a friendly amendment. There are revised minutes. So do I have to wait for a second to bring that up?
Let me rephrase. I move to approve the revised minutes.
I second.
Okay. You guys crack me up. Okay. Any comment? Seeing none. Mr. Nguyen, would you please conduct a vote?
Commissioner Olczak?
Aye.
Commissioner Heckman?
Aye.
Commissioner Lowing? Commissioner Wicks,
Aye.
Vice Chair Rupavar,
Aye.
Commissioner Suma,
Yes.
Chair Templeton.
Yes.
The motion carries 7-0. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, everyone. And thank you for those revisions, Commissioner Heckman. Next up is committee items. Anyone? All right, I will go on the XCAP. We have begun deliberations around the Charleston and Meadow crossings, and we meet every Wednesday right before this meeting. So usually 3:30 or 4, it varies from week to week, and if we have a PTC meeting at the time. So please check out the website, Connecting Palo Alto. And is there any update from, what's our other committee, NVCAP perhaps?
Sure.
Okay.
We are having what I think will be kind of our final full meeting on October 8th. And my understanding is that staff is going to present 2 alternative plans.
Wow, that's coming up. Thank you for that. Okay, moving on to commissioner questions, comments, announcements, and future agenda items. Commissioners, raise your hand if you have questions, comments, or announcements. Seeing none. Oh,
Yeah, no, I'll just make,
hold on. Commissioner
I want to
Riggs
call,
has his hand up.
sorry.
Just go ahead, Commissioner Olczyk, it's fine.
I just wanted to sort of make a comment, which is, I guess, is qualified as an update. I'm sure some of you have noticed that over 101, that bike bridge has begun to be constructed. And just to sort of put things into perspective, in 2012, as a commissioner, I remember supporting a recommendation to create a bike bridge design competition, which I think was implemented in 2013, which led to, I think, none of the designs getting chosen. But just to kind of put things in perspective, in 2012, we began reviewing the idea of that bike bridge, and that now 2020, it's getting built. So things happen, they just take 7 years.
That is quite the perspective. I appreciate that, Commissioner Olczyk. Commissioner Riggs.
Oh, I just want to say, I'm sorry, I was dealing with unstable internet, and I was just like trying to figure out if I was ready to go on internet. Apologies, that was a weird 45 minutes or 30 minutes last little bit. That's it.
It happens, I appreciate that. All right. Ms. French, do you have any future agenda items that you would like to share?
Well, the next we visit with the Planning and Transportation Commission will be October 14th. As you'll recall, you continued an item to that date, the Castellia School. We also have a RHNA item, RHNA methodology, an informational report we're preparing. Things are kind of moving quickly in the world of the RHNA and all those Housing Methodology Committee meetings. So we'll try to report out on that. That's all I've got.
All right, I appreciate it. And with that, we will conclude this meeting. Thank you, everyone. Good night.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank you. Good night.
Thanks all for your work.